Rupert Lowe, reform is topping the polls at the moment. Can that be sustained until 2029, or is this just a flash in the pan?
Well, Gordon, my own view on this, and I've been totally consistent on it. Everybody laughed at me when I said I was going to be elected as a Reform MP, which I've now been, along with 4 other fine individuals. I also said we will win the next election, and I maintain that that is the case. If I'd said to you a year ago that we would be out-polling all the other major parties, you would have laughed me out of court as a lunatic. So I think the British public are finally realising that the way in which they've been governed is not right. I can confirm that, having been in Parliament for 6 months. I can absolutely tell them without any hesitation, Parliament is dysfunctional, the civil service is dysfunctional, our media is dysfunctional, and a lot of things need to change. So unfortunately this has gone on for a very long time, and it's far from certain that it hasn't gone too far. But if we don't win in 2029, I again definitively will say it will have gone too far by the time anybody can do anything about it.
What is your forecast for how the next general election will play out? You've already said you think reform will win, but can you just sort of talk me through how you think that will play out?
Well, I think reform will win. I actually voted against proportional representation, even though intellectually, as a party, we support that long term. But I think in the short term, it's crucial we have first past the post, because we can actually win the election. Once we go over 31% of the vote, and as you know, we're polling somewhere around between 25 and 26%. That's the official polls, and these are polls that have often not gone in our favour. I actually think that understates the support. So we've got a lot of young people who quite rightly have identified the fact that their future is extremely linked to change and to an improved, more accountable way for government to function. So, you know, it's all very well for the baby boomers who've probably done extremely well, who live in the best streets, who have all the money, who are getting their pensions. As we know, the state pension is a fraud, it's a put and take scheme. And these poor young people, who there are fewer of them than there are the baby boomers, the chances are that when they come to retire, they will be retiring at a much older age than people retiring today. So in a way, there's a sort of schism opening up between the young and the old, and I think the young can see that they need more representative, more sort of long-headed leadership, which is going to try and put their interests somewhere near the top of the agenda, whereas at the moment, I think, you know, they're probably feeling a little bit unloved. So, and they are joining up in big numbers, which is fantastic. So we're not a party of the fossils like everybody has always accused us of being.
What are the currently membership numbers?
We're near 200,000. I mean, we're you know, there was that spat between Nigel and Kemi.
Yeah.
We've, I think, left the Tories in our wake quite comfortably, and people are signing up. You know, the key question for me is, if we win the election, are we going to be ready? Will we have the structure? Will we have the policies? Will we? So there's a huge amount of work for us to do to get all that right.
Yes. You mentioned 31%. Why is 31% a significant number?
Well, because I think once you start going over 31%, the dynamics of first past the post mean you win loads of seats. So I think we're going to win. I'm pretty confident we'll win most of the red wall seats. I mean, Labour are doing their best to destroy their own rural vote. Look at what they've done, Gordon. I mean, in a short space of time, they have alienated the pensioners, they've alienated the farmers, they've alienated small business, they've alienated the education sector. And, you know, they are, in my view, not putting the interests of the British people at the top of the agenda, and they deserve to be punished for that at the next election. Equally, the Tories deserve to be punished for doing absolutely diddly squat with an 80-seat majority that we helped them win last time round. In fact, less than nothing. So the uniparty, as I call them, have failed us. They aren't holding the civil service to account. The civil service is out of control. It's far too big. There are far too many of them. Their pensions are far too big. and they're dysfunctional. So ultimately, the ministers are supposed to hold the civil service to account. That's not been happening. So we've got to reform the way in which we're governed, and we've got to start putting Britain at the top of the agenda, and we've got to start learning from what's happening in America. And if we don't, then, you know, as a country, I fear for us, frankly.
And what way?
We have the best people, by a long way.
Okay.
And that again is a function of history, because a lot of good people were persecuted in Europe, and a lot of them came here because we've always been a very tolerant country.
Yeah.
But we're losing them, Gordon. They're going. There's 2,500 people queuing to get into Monaco as we speak. There are people going to Dubai. There are people going to Greece. There are people going to Portugal. There are people going to other places, Mauritius, other places where talent is wanted, wealth is wanted, and ability is wanted. And these are the rainmakers. These are the people who drive the economy.
And they're being driven away by
And they're
tax,
being driven away.
you're saying.
Because what's happened is the state has become the enemy of the people. The state is supposed to serve the people, but it has become a rapacious enemy. It's taking their money, it's taxing them too much, it's destroying the private sector, and ultimately, you know, we are led by a front bench that has got virtually no business experience whatsoever. They are amateurs. They're rank amateurs, the whole lot of them. And a lot of them have been poisoned by this, you know, this view that socialism is good. Let me tell you, socialism is a poison. And, you know, why has this country, why do they think it's okay to tax people who are contributing and give it to people who aren't working for it? And by the way, we've got a lot of very clever scroungers who know how to work the system. And that's all got to change. You know, we've got to reward those people who basically are driving the economy, who are employing people, who are collecting all the taxes and gift wrapping them and giving them to the state. The state is supposed to be serving the people. It's not serving the people. And that's not just the state, that's local government as well. They're not serving the people. And when I hear that, you know, give you an example, Eastleigh Borough Council are £500 million in debt. How? Birmingham's bust. How? I mean, how is this happening in people's name? And it's wrong. So it's got to change. Reform is the only hope, but we have to make sure that we're ready to learn. I don't think we'll get a second shot like Donald Trump. He tried it once and learnt, a bit like Maggie when she was Prime Minister. She realised after a number of goes how much power she actually had. Trump learnt first time round. This time he had 3,500 people ready to go, and he is enacting the legislation that needs to be enacted from day one. And that's what we've got to do, and we win.
You say you don't think you'll get a second chance. What do you mean by that?
Well, Trump's had two, he got elected in 2016, and he only had 16 or 17 people ready to go. And, you know, when you take on this homunculus-like, you know, organs of the state, you've got to know exactly which tentacles of it you're going to cut off.
I see. And
how you're going to enact deep-rooted change.
So you're
and
saying...
it took him, and again, I think it's a bit like prime ministers here, because as you know, our constitution is unwritten. America's constitution was written by some of the greatest men on earth who realized that the state was always the enemy and the individual was always what needed to be protected. So the Jeffersons, Madisons, Adams, all those wonderful men who wrote the Constitution, they realized that. Actually, the American Constitution was overridden by Roosevelt in the New Deal, where he overrode the 9th and 10th Amendment, which effectively allowed the federal government to grow like a weed.
Yeah.
But now I think people like Musk have understood that if they can control these state payments and handouts, then they can control the way in which, and they can start to bring the state back to account. And as you know, under our Constitution, you know, we're supposed to have a parliament that is omnipotent. This is post-Civil War, 1689 Bill of Rights. We're supposed to have the king as the titular head. We're supposed to then have the lords, you know, guiding the commons to ensure that the legislation we pass is fit for purpose. But, and at the end of the day, arguably, our constitution is far more open to a power grab than theirs. Theirs has checks and balances which have been written into it. Ours doesn't. Yeah. And again, when Maggie was was prime minister, one of the greatest prime ministers we've had. And again, as I've said in many occasions, when she left, we were at peace with ourselves. Immigration was under control. Debt was way down. We'd actually relieved the burden of the state from the private sector, and Britain had flourished.
Yeah.
So, but there are these malign forces who seem to hate anyone who's successful. If they're successful legally, why would you do that? They have every right to be respected, and they have every right to be able to spend their money as they want and leave their money to whoever they want to. I mean, I disagree profoundly with inheritance tax. We should not have inheritance tax.
Yeah.
All it's doing is it's strengthening the hand of an indolent, bloated state.
But presumably, you don't think we should have zero tax, so because schools, bin collections have to be paid
I didn't
for.
say zero tax.
No. But what I was going to ask was, what would you set the level of taxation at if you became Chancellor?
Well, what you first of all have to do is identify what is the job of the state. And if you're an Austrian school economist like me, the state's job should be minimalist.
Yeah.
What's happened is it's become a sort of handout machine. And if with the questions I'm asking in Parliament, we are actually discovering quite how much of a confetti machine the Department for Work and Pensions is. It's handing out things which it shouldn't be handing out to people it shouldn't be handing them out to.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I think the questions we've asked, we don't always get the answers, because when the answers are too shocking, we don't get an answer.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot we don't get an answer to. But when we do get the answers, and when I stand up in Parliament, it's not rocket science. I'm not that brilliant. I'm just a punter who's come into politics at the age of 66, who's run businesses and done lots of things in my life. Most of the people here haven't done that. So, I'm like the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. But the point is that, at the end of the day, we are not seeing a state that is as accountable to the British people as it should be. And they are crushing aspiration. They are overtaxing the private sector, and nobody's holding them to account. Now, when I say I ask the questions, I don't think the front bench ministers know the answers to those questions. And when they answer them, I think they look shocked.
Yeah.
The civil service knows the answer to those questions. They're very well aware of what's going on. So actually, I believe the civil service is the cancer at the heart of Britain that needs to be exorcised. It is not doing what it should be doing. It is not serving the interests of the British people. Those interests should be put at the top of the agenda. Currently, they're being put a long way down the agenda. And I find that quite extraordinary, Gordon. I don't understand what society would do that. Do you? I find it incredible.
Yeah. Just to go back to the question of tax, I mean, you say you've come into politics at the age of 66.
Well, not quite, because I stood for the referendum party.
You've been an MEP.
No, I stood for the referendum party, but I've come into Parliament.
And you have been an MEP.
I've been an MEP.
So you must have, you've thought about this for a long time. Do you have any sort of parameters of where you think, let's say, income tax should be for a start?
Well, the first thing you've got to do is identify what functions the state fulfills.
You've said that, but do you have...
You can't start by saying what tax are we going to charge and then fill the state with that tax. You must have thought about this. You have to start about what do we need from the state and then what do we need to fund it.
Sure, but you don't have a number.
I don't have a number because I haven't reviewed what the state, but it's a lot lower.
Okay.
So if let's say, to give you an answer to your question, let's say the state currently is nearly accounting for 50% of GDP.
Yeah.
My view is it should be accounting for less than 25% of GDP.
Okay.
So if that's the case, then you need to charge far less tax.
Yeah.
And what that means practically, Gordon, is you leave more money in the hands of individuals to decide how they want to spend the money.
Yeah.
So I profoundly disagree with QE. I profoundly disagree with the fact the state can run up deficits in your name and my name, the taxpayer, with no accountability.
QE being quantitative
easing. Printing money.
Yeah.
I disagree with the state running up debt. I disagree with the state printing money to cover deficits. I disagree with the way they behaved over COVID. I mean, I disagree profoundly with almost every aspect of the British state at the moment.
Your opponents obviously say that Reform is just a party of protest. They say it's a one-man band. Nigel, what do you? You've already said that you need to do a lot to become a party that would be ready to govern in 4 years' time. What do you need to do, and what are you doing to make that happen?
I'm not sure how you can call us a protest party when we're leading in the polls. I mean, when do you morph from being a protest party into being a leading party? I don't know. That's a question for you.
It's because people think that at the moment there are only 5 of you in Parliament. You have a huge number of votes, as you've said, but you refer to it yourself. You need to become a party that people take seriously as a party that can govern, as opposed to a receptacle
have
for
you read our contract with the people?
Disgruntlement.
Have you read our contract with the people?
Not for a while.
You need to reread our contract with the people, which again, I wrote part of it.
But it's about people as well, isn't it? It's about having a lot of serious people.
We've got to refine our
right
policies. That's in the contract with the people. So I'm absolutely adamant that we have to get our policies right.
Yeah.
They have to be libertarian policies, basically based on common sense. So our theme is common sense, Gordon. That's what we haven't got in Britain today. So I don't now think we're a protest party. I think we are a party who the British people have finally, they're very phlegmatic, they're very good people. And as I say to them, don't expect the 5 of us in Parliament to make all the change. We're not Charles Atlas holding up the entire show. Challenge any form of petty bureaucracy that you come across. Challenge it legally. Don't let them get away with it. Get in their faces, ask questions, ask them to justify what they're doing. And that doesn't matter whether it's local government, whether it's national government. I think people have got to start being proactive. Now, if you call that protest, I don't. I call that holding government to account.
You're very into personal responsibility, aren't you?
I am. I like the individual. I love the individual. I think the individual is a very good unit. Everybody finds their own level. Everybody, and again, we employ lots of people. I've given you a book on our family business. That's one of our businesses. You know, we've got lots of people who work for us. There is no way that an individual normally treats another individual in the wrong way. They all work together because it's in their collective interest to do so. The state, however, when you get an unaccountable state and you get average lightweight people at the top, you start to get people behaving badly towards other people. And you only have to look at what happened under communism, what happened under any form of totalitarianism. No, we want devolved government based on the individual. And you do need some government, of course you do. You need government for defence, you need government for the basic sort of structures of life. As Adam Smith would say, you basically, you need a structure that ensures that if people start to treat each other unfairly, there is a mechanism to put that right. Otherwise, just let people get on with it.
Yeah, okay.
But the problem is we've become and I don't quite know why, but we've lost our way in terms of individualism, and that's what we've got to get back.
You're an employer. Do you worry, or have you found that the country has become lazier over the course of the time that you've been running businesses? I mean, look, less skilled, or what have you seen?
We're losing our skilled people, and we're gaining less skilled people. Do I think the system we've got now works well? No, I don't. Do I think the health and safety executive is a good thing? No, it's out of control. It's a quango. It's like all these quangos. And what I was trying to say to you earlier is Parliament should be omnipotent, but Parliament's been undermined by Blair, Brown, Campbell and Mandelson, who passed, and Derry Irvine, who passed all this legislation which has basically undermined Parliament's sovereignty. And it's given power to unelected quangos, the health and safety executive. Just look at what the FCA and the PRA, originating through the Financial Services Market Act via the FSA, they have destroyed London's capital markets. Over 20 years, regulations destroyed London's capital markets. The most successful markets almost in the world. We're very lucky we have a beautiful time zone right in the middle between East and West. We were booming. And in my day, under Thatcher, we were a great centre for raising capital, for matching ideas with money.
Yeah.
And that's the object of what you need in a capital market.
Okay.
We've lost that. That's gone. Why? Regulation. Give you another example. What are we about to do to our Premier League? A source of huge soft power throughout the world, right?
Football Premier League we're talking.
A huge, it was, by the way, built up in a free, unregulated, self-regulated market. Nothing to do with any government, nothing to do with any regulator. Basically the free market.
Yeah.
And it's now the most successful league. Soft power, influence, globally.
Yeah.
Huge amounts of money to the wretched Rachel Reeves. Vast amounts through the payroll, through national insurance. These players, every time they earn 25 million, the government's getting 45% of it, plus the national insurance, plus it all goes through the payroll, with its legs pinned behind its ears, absolutely straight to the state to waste it. So it's a huge, huge success story. What are we now going to do? Regulate it. And when I hear Rachel Reeves talking about regulating for growth, Gordon, what a load of absolute rubbish. It's a complete oxymoron. When have you ever heard of regulating for growth? The woman doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
She's a chalk jockey. So at the end of the day, you know, we've got this government that is incompetent, that is basically destroying a lot of the structures across Britain. As I said earlier, APR, they promised they wouldn't put APR on farmland. They put APR on farmland. So having secured farmers' votes, what have they done? Exactly the opposite of what they said they'd do. Do you think that's honest?
Yeah. Okay.
Small businesses, they put APR on small businesses.
Yeah.
Pensioners, they're taking the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. Education, probably our most successful sector. What are they doing? Putting VAT on private school fees. Honestly, this is lunacy. And our education sector is probably one of our biggest export sectors. It brings huge numbers of people here, and we are very good at it. So why would you undermine that for some sort of socialist sort of dogma?
All right.
So look, I'm very irritated with what's going on, as I think a lot of other British people are, and I think that's going to be reflected in a far, far greater amount of support for reform from across all the age groups.
Yeah, okay. If reform didn't win the next election outright, let's just say for the sake of argument, could you foresee a coalition government with Reform and the Tories?
Well, I think we will win it, but I don't want to be overconfident, but I think, you know, I've said this consistently. So when we were polling even 7, 8, 9%, I've said we're going to win the election. So I'm being consistent on that. As you probably know, there was something called a coupon election. I think it was in 22. So that's where you basically do a deal. But I don't see us doing a deal with the Tories. I think the Tories...
I'm talking about after an election as opposed to
Well,
before.
I'm talking about the Tory versus Reform. I think the Tories are dysfunctional now. I think they've basically lost their way in head office, so that needs to be reformed.
But, sorry to interrupt.
Their MPs are largely Lib Dems, not Tories.
Sure.
So I don't. If you're asking me, I don't see the Tories unifying the common sense wing of the party.
But what I'm asking,
whereas we're clean. So I think the Tories who are sensible Tories are more likely to join Reform than we are likely to join the Tories. So in answer to your question, let's see where we go. And all I can see happening is us and the Tories running parallel between now and whenever the election is. Yeah. And then I think we'll see, and then depending on where we are, I think it's very difficult to predict the outcome of what happens until you know where we are as the election's announced.
Okay. So you're not ruling it out?
I don't think it's in our interest to be taking any Tory who comes our way. There are some Tories who I think are good news, but I don't think our supporters want to see a rehash of the Tory party in Reform. I think they want to see genuine reform.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just thinking that if you look at the polls, which is where we started, it's basically a third at the moment, isn't it? And if that happened at an election, you might find, obviously you could have a hung parliament, you might have a very sort of unheard of situation in this country where you basically have three parties that have all more or less got the same number of MPs. So in that situation, the most likely way of forming a government would surely be the Tories and Reform going into coalition. You're not going to go into coalition with Labour.
But that's all. It's all conjecture, really. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not at the election. I mean, do I think Starmer will last his full term? Probably not. I mean, I think the way they're going, he may not be there.
Yeah.
And then God knows who they would appoint if he weren't there. I mean, I personally think having this voice coach over COVID, you know, the guy should resign. I think it's quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
Not only did the voice coach not make any difference, but, you know, what was she doing going there on, I gather it was on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Who knows what he was up to? I mean, the guy, in my view, is a duplicitous human being, and he shouldn't be leading the country. That's my opinion on Keir Starmer.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I mean, human rights lawyers, as you know, I'm on the record as saying it's another industry that pork barrels a living on the back of a productive society, and they're a bloody nuisance.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think we have become, you asked me, have we become lazy? We've become dysfunctional because we've got all these, bit like in Gulliver's Travels, you know, he was held down by all these sort of, the Lilliputians, I think it was, who tied him down with all these, and that's what's happened to productive Britain. We're being tied down by a state that has become our enemy.
Yeah, all right.
So look, on the Tories, we just got to keep going, and we did give the Tories an 80-seat majority last time. And I'd like to ask you a question. What do you think they did with it?
Well, Kemi Badenoch says they didn't do anything and people were right to kick them out. So there's, I suppose, them.
So how many plays with the toy set do you think they deserve?
How many?
How many plays with the toy set? So how many times do you think they should be given the opportunity to play with the toy set?
Well, I'm not here to answer that question, am I? But
and you're right about the third, but the problem is half the Tory MPs are Lib Dems.
Elon Musk thinks you should be the leader of reform instead of Nigel Farage.
No, that's not what he said. So what he's been, and I'm very honoured and privileged that he's, you know, I think he is the world's most prominent and successful entrepreneur, for which I hugely admire him. He does follow what we're doing on Twitter, and that to me is a huge honour. I think he follows us now, which is great.
Yeah.
He has 215 million people following him. I only have 271,000 people following me, so I'm a minnow in Twitter terms compared with him.
Okay.
But when one of my lot asked him, did he think I should be Prime Minister, he didn't say I should or shouldn't. What he said was he enjoyed what we were putting on Twitter. That's different.
Okay.
Nigel's the leader of reform.
But he thinks Nigel shouldn't be the leader of reform, and he likes you.
I don't know where that came from. I mean, he did say that, but that's, you're linking the two and probably stitching two ends to meet in the middle. I don't think he actually said, I don't know him. I've never spoken to Elon Musk. Yeah.
But he did say he thought Nigel should not be the leader. How awkward a moment was that for reform?
Well, I put out a statement, you know, that day, and I put out a statement supporting Nigel. I put out a statement supporting what Tommy Robinson had done on these wretched grooming gangs. He was in the same statement. You've probably seen it.
Yeah.
Very carefully worded. I think he's not given the credit he deserves for what he's done on this vile blot and stain on our history. There's these Pakistani rape gangs, Gordon, are an absolute disgrace, and they still haven't yet been dealt with. It needs to be exorcised from Britain.
We'll come on to the grooming gangs.
I'm absolutely irritated beyond belief about it.
We'll come on to that. You've mentioned Tommy Robinson. Regardless of whether you agree with his position on grooming gangs, is it smart politics for you to in any way sort of stand alongside him or give him credit for anything?
I'm not standing alongside him, and I've said consistently, I was on Michelle Dewberry on GB News on Monday.
But you said
I basically said, render unto Tommy Robinson what is Tommy Robinson's, and render unto reform what is reform's. But that doesn't mean to say you don't give credit to people who've actually done good work on something. Now, I don't know what Tommy Robinson's done legally.
But he's a vile man, isn't he?
Hang on. I've said he's not right for reform. He himself says he's not right for reform. So you can try and make as much mischief as you want, but the fact of the matter is, we aren't going to come together, but that doesn't mean to say you don't give people credit for what they've done well.
Even if they are pretty disgusting individuals.
Well, do you think he should be denied visitation rights? Do you think he should be treated, don't you think he should be treated like everybody else in prison?
Yeah, I think that... that if
aren't we all equal under the law?
Yes, but that doesn't mean I have to, in any way, give him credit for anything he says or does. That's a different matter.
So you don't give him credit for what he's actually said and done to uncover
If I was a politician,
the Pakistani rape gangs.
If I was a politician,
you can't even.
Well, he's not the only person that's done that, is he? So if I was a
think
politician,
he's done
I wouldn't
more than
be,
anybody else on it.
I wouldn't be. I don't think it's smart politics to give any credit to someone like Tommy Robinson. Is all I'm saying, and I'm asking you if you think it is.
Well, I put it in a statement. I said he deserves credit for it, so I've done it.
I wonder if you regret that.
I believe in giving people credit where they're due. I believe that at the end of the day, I wasn't part of his trial. I don't know what he did or didn't do. I don't know the veracity of it. I don't know whether the state is treating him as they treat everybody else, nor do you. I think our judiciary has been probably slightly captured. I think what's happened in Britain is that, you know, our establishment have become very concerned about being called racist. They've become very concerned about the sort of multicultural post-war experiment. And at the end of the day, they've allowed the growth of Sharia courts, which I think is a disgrace. If you come to this country, Gordon, you live by our laws, we're all equal under the law, we cannot have Sharia courts. I think there are 92 of them across the country. It's a disgrace. What it is people basically abrogating their own responsibility for dealing with issues. That's what it is. And I'm sorry, it's got to be tackled. It's got to be dealt with. Okay. And if it isn't dealt with, it's wrong. So I can only judge by what I see. And I've got, funny enough, today we've got one of the victims of the grooming gangs coming to see us today. I get lots of people now speaking to me. I've just given some money to the Maggie Oliver Foundation because I think this is such a blot on our history. It has not been properly dealt with. And you tell me why Labour aren't having a proper national inquiry with statutory powers.
You would support a national inquiry?
Of course I do. I want one. We need one. We must have one.
What about deportations? Should Labour be deporting anyone who's involved in grooming gangs if they are not British citizens, or if they are, I don't know, where would you put the bar
I'm
for that?
completely consistent on deportation. So I would detain and deport any illegal migrant who comes to this country. That illegal means illegal, okay? They're travelling across safe countries. There is absolutely no reason for them to stay here. There's absolutely no reason for us to be giving them priority over honest, decent British taxpayers, pushing them to the top of waiting lists, putting them in hotel rooms, giving them all the things that the British people don't get, and then taking the winter fuel allowance off our pensioners. Disgraceful. That's, to me, that's evil. So they should be detained and deported. Foreign criminals in our prisons, we're releasing prisoners early. Foreign criminals in our prisons, Gordon, should be deported. We don't need them. There's 10,500 of them. I know that because I've asked a question on it.
Okay.
But I'm coming to your answer. Those people who are here, so the Pakistani, and they were predominantly Pakistani rape gangs, there were some Bangladeshis and some Afghanistanis involved, but those people who were found guilty of raping young white working class girls should be returned to Pakistan. We give 133 million, we did last year, in foreign aid to Pakistan. We're spending 10 million on these regional inquiries, these regional with no statutory powers, 10 million quid. We can say to Pakistan, you will take these people back, or we are not going to be sending you foreign aid.
Even if they are UK citizens?
Well, a lot of them aren't UK citizens. So,
but if they are?
So we have to look at what we can do legally. If they're not UK citizens, they should be sent back to Pakistan.
Okay.
And I would also be prosecuting, as I've said, and I said it publicly, and I'll say it again to you, those people who knew that these people were perpetrating these crimes, who lived with them, who basically knew what was happening, they're as guilty as the people who are doing it.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I take a very Protestant view on this.
All right, but in principle, if somebody was born abroad, comes here, gets citizenship, but then commits a crime such as rape gangs, you would be in favour of returning them to their country of birth. Is that what you're saying?
If it's possible to return them, yes. I disagree profoundly. Maybe you agree with what's happening. Maybe you think it's okay for these people to rape, young white working class English girls. I don't. I think it's vile.
All right.
And I'll tell you something else. I think the Labour bloc vote has got something to do with this as well. Because, and that's another thing we will do away with. Postal voting needs to be exorcised from Britain.
Yeah.
Only people in the services or people who cannot actually get to the polling booth should be allowed to vote by post. Otherwise, it's one man, one vote in the polling booth.
Okay.
There are plenty of them.
You think that there are these voting factories where people are collecting people's voting slips?
What do you think?
Well, I know it's happened in the past, for sure.
Well, you know it's happening.
We know that for a fact.
It has been happening. It does happen.
Yeah.
So no, it should be one man or one woman, one vote. And I'll tell you something else. Everything that we do should be in English. No translation fees. None of the other nonsense that's going on throughout the public sector and throughout Britain nowadays. If you come here, you speak English. End of story. That doesn't matter. It's the NHS, whatever you come to. You live by our laws. You respect our culture. You integrate, and you speak English.
Okay. What we've got the May elections coming up, quite hard and fast. Well,
there's an announcement today, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's assume that the local elections go ahead in May. What would success look like for Reform in those elections?
Well, I don't know if they're going to go ahead in Norfolk. So, as you probably know, they're trying to create a unitary authority. And I did stand up in Parliament and say the Americans fought a war of independence on the basis of no taxation without representation. So should people have to pay their council tax beyond May, when the people representing them will not technically be elected? And by what name do we refer to these people, these unelected people who are still carrying out duties? Are they going to waive their salaries? Are they going to behave in a way that represents the fact they're unelected? So I don't know what's going to happen.
But let's assume there are elections across the country.
Again, how quickly do you think these unitary authorities will be set up? Knowing the history of the way in which our government moves at glacial pace and our local governments move at glacial pace, I can't see these elections happening for at least a year and probably two. So how long is this going to go on for? Therefore, for me, the default position should be to hold the elections and then to introduce the unitary authorities.
But to go back to my question,
that's democratic.
Sure. What would success look like? What are you targeting?
Well, we'll do very well. I don't have a view, but I think if you look at in Star Wars terms, Gordon, the Force is with us. And if the Force is with you, you tend to do quite well.
Okay.
But I think we have to throw ourselves onto the British public and say, vote for Reform and see what happens.
Okay. Who are Reform's voters? You mentioned earlier this idea of a schism, which I find interesting. Who are the people who are coming out and voting for you? Are they? Is it a mixture of pensioners and very young people and nothing in between? Or you tell me.
Well, I think increasingly it's young people. So Gen Zs, and as I said to you earlier. But I think it's now across the spectrum. I'm of the public school persuasion, where most of my friends are what I call bonehead Tories. But I'm even beginning to get messages from them. I got one this morning, funny enough, from a very successful businessman who said him and everybody in his area do not believe that the Tory party can deliver for them. And they all want to meet me and talk about donating to Reform and joining Reform. So everywhere I go, I'm finding people who I think can now see the depth of failure that has succumbed, that the British state has succumbed to. And I've been shocked in Parliament. I've said this in another podcast the other day, that since I've been in Parliament, when I chair a board meeting, if you and I are on the board and you're asked a question and I'm chairman and you don't answer the question, I go, Gordon, you haven't answered the question, will you please answer the question? That's how the board functions. But in Parliament, when I ask a question across the chamber, and Sir Lindsay, who's a very good man, I like him very much, but he is a Labour MP. So I ask a question, perfectly reasonable question, which deserves an answer. And all I get is a sort of babble about how the Tories left them a 22 billion black hole and they all sit down. And I go, well, that's not even close to answering the question. So either Sir Lindsay should say, I'm terribly sorry, you haven't answered the question, or I should be given the right to say, answer the question.
Yeah. No, I'm sure a lot of people who
But
watch it think the
people
same.
who watch Parliament, it's bringing Parliament into disrepute.
Well, it's very frustrating.
Because Parliament is not delivering what it should be delivering.
Okay.
So look, it's dysfunctional.
Okay.
And it needs to change radically.
All right.
And by the way, I think Parliament has actually undermined the authority of MPs. As you know, we had the expenses scandal. We then had, people throwing accusations at Dominic Raab of bullying. So where does bullying start, and where does holding your staff to account start?
Well, that's
so look. I think Parliament's staff are now more powerful almost than the MPs, and that's wrong.
Okay.
MPs should be omnipotent. They have been elected by the British people to represent the British people.
Okay.
And it's their job to do that, and it's the parliamentary staff job to ensure that the MPs are supported in every way possible to ensure they can deliver for the people. That's how it should work.
If Reform did form a government, if they were in power, what would their priorities be? I mean, I think we know about immigration, but I think people are interested in knowing what your priorities would be beyond immigration.
Well, if you read, again, this is why I urge everybody watching to read our contract with the people.
But you tell us.
But we called it a contract with the people because all the other parties break their manifestos, so we thought we called it a contract. But I mean, look, there are things like student debt. Give you some examples. Student debt is basically interest being charged. I think it's something like 7.5% on student debt. That is lunacy. That needs to be dealt with. Yep. I mean, these students have been encouraged to go and run up debt, and I think it's now that fees have gone up, they're running up something like £50,000 of debt by the time they leave university, and then they're being charged this ridiculous interest rate. I think Theresa May
so get debt down on student debt.
So that's important.
Give me another bullet point.
Well, taxation, obviously, tax is too high.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
We need to cut tax.
NHS, what would you do about that?
Well, the NHS is a problem. As you know, the NHS, and I think a lot of our problems do stem from post the Second World War, where we had this, as you know, Churchill got voted out very quickly after the war, and we ended up with the genesis of the welfare state. And I think that the reasons for that were quite understandable. We'd fought 2 world wars. Lots of people had died, and it was considered that rather than being elitist, it should be more inclusive. So we ended up with the NHS, which at the time, as you probably know, was a good idea. But as we all know, at the time, people didn't live very long. So national insurance was fine, and actually the government probably ended up with a surplus. But gradually, as people have lived longer and longer and longer, and as the state has become less and less efficient. And as GPs have been undermined and administrators have been pushed to the fore.
But what's the answer?
The answer is it needs total reform. Now I don't have the answers, but this is what we need to refine, and this is what we are going to refine in our policy document.
Okay, so you'll have an answer by the time of the next election.
We are on looking at pensions. We're looking at everything. We're looking at the Constitution. We're looking at pensions. We're looking at education. We're looking at
should the triple lock go?
So we don't have all the answers. This is the great thing I love about you guys in the media. You think politicians, you ask them a question, you think they can deliver the answer.
Well,
and by the way, one of the things that I've found is when I say to people, I don't know the answer, but I can find the answer because I'm used to finding answers, people love it. Because they don't want some jumped up little twat saying he knows the answers when he doesn't.
But also people want to know what you would change, and that's not an answer.
Well, we're going to change pretty much everything.
Would you change pension? You were talking to me earlier about how you get
take the VAT threshold. You're asking me if you want me to give you the VAT threshold. I personally think the VAT threshold should be cut hugely. Increased hugely. So at the moment the VAT threshold's 85 grand. We think it should be doubled. So again, where we end up with our manifesto or our contract with the people, that's a matter for debate amongst us. Corporation tax. My personal view, I'd like to see Britain with the lowest corporation tax in Europe. As you probably know, Ireland has been rebuilt by being allowed a tax arbitrage in Europe. So where's everyone set their businesses up? In Ireland. Why is Ireland booming? Because she had a tax arbitrage, which technically broke every European rule in the world. So look, it's not rocket science. It's about reducing the burden of the state
Okay.
and releasing the individual. And do you know what? The Laffer curve tells you if you cut taxes, you not only collect more tax, but people actually end up with a better life.
Okay. You were talking to me earlier about how you get a state pension, you're a millionaire. Should state pensions be means tested?
Well, not if people have paid into them all their lives.
So it's okay for you to get a state
I think the state
pension
pension's
even
a
though
fraud,
you
as I
don't need
said.
it?
I think it's a fraud, as I said to you earlier.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want to allow people to opt out, fine. But what you're also suggesting now is that we have this sort of socialist view of life where, I mean, I've already opted out of the NHS because I just told you earlier,
Yeah.
I pay a private doctor, as did my wife and my
increasing
children,
numbers of people
because I
are.
can't get an appointment,
Yeah.
because there are so many people trying to get appointments, and because the NHS is so dysfunctional.
Yeah.
You know, take the other day, I thought I had the beginnings of pneumonia. They tell me I have an appointment in a month. I said I'll be dead in a month.
Yes. Yeah.
So I go and see a private doctor and I end up buying my own antibiotics. So, but I'm still paying national insurance.
Yes.
Well, I'm not now because I'm actually over 66.
Sure.
But,
Okay. So you think?
but look, I mean,
So you're in favour of universal pensions if people are paid in?
my parliamentary salary, as you probably know, I give
Yes.
to charity every
Yeah.
month. So
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take something that you know, I'm very happy to give back.
No.
Labour
But we're
have made it
talking
very
about-
Labour have made it very easy for me. So
Yeah.
my first month went to a pensions charity, my second month an agricultural charity, my third month a business charity, and my fourth month an education charity.
Okay.
And I've just given some money to the grooming gang. So they're making it very easy because they are rolling through Britain, damaging the interests of various sectors.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. But we're talking about millions of people who get pensions, not just you. So should you've said you're not in favour of pensions being means
people have
tested if you
paid
paid
in-
in. Okay. What about the triple lock?
The triple lock is a difficult one. I mean, I don't have the answer on the triple lock. I think the triple lock obviously was designed probably to win the pension vote.
Yeah.
But Labour have now done their best to lose the pension vote. I think we'd have to look at the triple lock and when we've got our policy document being formulated. I mean, when we go into the election, we'll have the answers on these things. But I'm not just going to give you a off the top of my head view. It needs to be looked at.
Here's maybe an easier question. You are very much someone who knows a lot about the care home sector because that's part of your business. What's the answer on paying for social care?
Well, social care again is a difficult one. I mean, we've got an ageing population. We've got a lot of people, you know, in social care. But again, the way the state is structured, it encourages people to spend all their money and end up with no money in their retirement and no money to fund their own care. Because as you know, if you have money, you have to spend it on your social care.
Yeah.
If you don't have money, the state pays for it.
Yes.
So does that give you an incentive to save for your social care?
I agree with you entirely on that, but what's the answer?
Well, the answer is to encourage people to save, give them tax breaks if necessary. I mean, again, I don't have the answers, but I'd rather we had a sort of private sector that was independent and proud and self-reliant than a sort of state that basically abuses people and behaves like a sort of a master, not a servant, which it's supposed to be. So that's the philosophy that we will always employ.
Yeah. Okay. Why is Oliver Cromwell your hero rather than, say, I don't know?
Well, I
Churchill?
think it was Elizabeth I and Oliver Cromwell. I mean, Oliver Cromwell is much maligned, as you know.
There's a statue of him outside, though.
I like it. He's a great man. I mean, he and Elizabeth I were the reason why we had in the end the British Empire.
Yeah.
They cleansed a rotten system and made us fit to become a superpower. So I liked him very much. I think he was a principled man. I can highly recommend anybody watching read Antonia Fraser's book on Cromwell. It's fantastic.
And he was a
Have
farmer,
you read it?
like you?
It's brilliant. He was a farmer. He was.
So he didn't. Cromwell?
I actually don't think he wanted power. As you know, after he won the Civil War, he actually spent a lot of time back in Huntingdonshire on his farm.
There's a parallel here, though, isn't there? Are you the new Cromwell?
No. No, I think, sadly, I'm not going to control the model army.
Okay.
I wish I could, Gordon, but I don't think there are any parallels.
All right, we're almost out of time.
The world in those days did make some sense. And you actually, in those days, I don't need to tell you how much income tax was there.
Sure.
Shall I tell you how much?
None.
0.
Just finally, what are your ambitions now for yourself? You're 67, as you said. You think that the party will be in government next time round. What personal ambitions do you have? You'll be 71 by the time that happens.
Look, I want to see change, Gordon, and I've got 4 children. I might croak. I could croak at any minute. I'm nearly at the 70 years and 10, which in biblical terms, that's it. You've had it.
Sure.
So, look, who knows? I mean, I'm still playing tennis. I'm still reasonably fit. I think my brain still works, but who knows? I think you have to live for the day.
Would you like to be Chancellor in a Farage government?
I haven't even thought about that. I mean, our job is to win the next election and to be the agents for radical change for Britain. And I think for an improved way of life for all of our citizens.
All right.
I want to see all these people who are going to Monaco coming back here, investing in Britain, starting businesses, building wealth, and actually making things make sense.
Okay. Well, Rupert Lowe, thank you very much.